what the tabulators read on election night. Voters do curious things with their ballots. You know, they'll be thinking with their pen, and they'll be, you know, tapping that oval, and then they think, nah, I wouldn't vote for Matt Dunlap on a dare. I'm going to vote for Scott Sithel. But it sees an overvote because it sees markings in both ovals. The human eye can make that distinction. So that's where you get into things like voter intent. And that's, but you know, we haven't seen wholesale changes. But you know, we've made a lot of improvements to the process, especially in hand count towns on election night, whereby there's a lot of double checking that goes on. So it's far less likely today that you have, you know, a election official tired transcribing, you know, 19 to 91, for example, on a tally sheet. That it was always a rarity, but you know, some of the process improvements we've made over the years have made that far less likely. So, like I said, we haven't seen wholesale changes in numbers, but you know, really part of the purpose of the recount, especially as we've seen over the years in legislative races, is to get an affirmation of what the voters said on election day, and especially when you have a really close race. You know, like we had the judge of probate race, started out 57 vote margin out of like nearly 28,000 casts. The margin did narrow, you know, to 25 votes, but it didn't change the outcome of the election. And I think for the candidate and their supporters, they like to have that confirmation that everything was done correctly, and that if you lose the race, you lose it because of the way the votes fell, not because it's the way the election. And I think that's really what the recount process affirms.
Have you guys been able to ascertain any confusion with the ranking process in the
Not in any systemic way that you can look at ballots and say, wow, people really didn't understand what's happening there. You know, I have not heard any of that from either side's counters. So it seems to have gone pretty smoothly from that perspective.
So people that wanted to rank understood. It doesn't look like there's like, I don't know, like there weren't a lot of people like crossing out WT.
No, I mean, no, nothing like that. Haven't seen anything like that. You know, I think what we heard anecdotally on election day, again, not on a systemic basis, but certainly anecdotally, in a few isolated cases that people got confused about the other side of the ballot because they thought they could rank their choices for governor and wound up voting for more than one candidate and then had to get replacement ballots because the tabulator was rejected. So, but again, not on a wholesale basis. You know, it's what actually, conversely, what I heard from voters after the election who knew nothing about this process and didn't vote in the primary, so they'd never seen it before. They really liked it. They really liked being able to pick and choose. Even though a couple of them told me they only voted for one candidate, they liked having the option. So I think the work that the town clerks did, that we were able to get information out. I think the voters, you know, proved that they were actually pretty smart and they could figure out the ballot. I think it all went pretty smoothly overall, and I think that's being reflected here. That's why we're a little bit ahead of schedule.
So overall, kind of a testimony to the state's public education system, because our voters actually have fairly well-educated and read instructions.
Yeah, and I think too, we sometimes sell voters short. You know, and I've said for a long time that voters are actually pretty smart. They know what they want, what they don't want, and they vote accordingly. So. I think from that vantage point, we haven't seen anything to argue with that here.
Are you saying anything on the case?
Well, only that
you were the defendant.
Yeah, the defendant. Yeah, I mean, I think we weren't shocked by the ruling. You know, I've known for a long time that this is something that's poorly understood. That the federal government has a very, very minor role in the conduct of elections. The states pretty much occupy the field, and the people of the several states determine how their elections are run. You know, that's why you see it a little bit different from state to state. You know, it's why half the states have a voter ID law and half the states don't. Many states have a voter registration deadline. States have runoffs. States have what they call jungle primaries, where it's the top two run against each other in the general election regardless of the party. So you can, like in California, two Democrats could run against each other in the general election. And that's because it's been determined to be that way by citizens and legislatures. So I think the court recognizes that, and I think the constitutional argument at the federal level just doesn't really wash. So. it's always nice to get that affirmation from a judge, you know. You do your best, but I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer. So getting a ruling that supports the operative theory that we've been operating under has been, it gives us some relief.
So, it was interesting in that when I was there for the actual hearing, there were a number of objections, including from your attorney,